So first off, I want to thank you very much for meeting with us.
Okay,
I
proud to
really,
do it.
I really do appreciate it. So you went to the doctor today, right?
Well, I'm trying to get a physical and medical release and a TB test for to move into a place in Waukegan. It's called it's like a halfway house, and they will help me find a job and give me counseling. And the typical stay there is 4 months, so that'll get me through winter anyway. But I'm hoping to just find a job. I may end up relocating to that town. But they want a COVID test and a TB test and a physical. And I went today and they said they didn't have me down for a physical, so now I have to go back on Wednesday. But it's just another stumbling block, it's a couple day detour.
One question I have for you is, you're out here in St. Charles right now. Did you grow up in this area?
Yes, pretty much.
Whereabouts?
Well, my mother married my stepfather. He lived out west of town. And I was like in junior high back then, 8th grade. And then I pretty much, when I went out on my own when I was 17, I lived right on Randall Road. I think it's called Fairground Crossings now. It was one of the cheapest apartments you could get in St. Charles. Obviously, I was just starting out. I was working as a line cook. And I've lived in a couple different apartments all around St. Charles, Batavia, Geneva, pretty much all in this area. I have lived in McHenry also, and, down in Aurora for a while. I worked now it's a doggy boarding center, but it used to be called Rex's Cork and Fork.
Yeah.
I worked there for a while, back when it was Rex's. I worked at Colonial that's right here next door.
Okay.
I did a lot of that before I got into the industrial stuff that I do. My last job was working here in St. Charles, the job that I lost that kind of contributed to my homelessness. And that was a plastics recycling place. Now, we wouldn't just recycle like old 2-liter bottles of pop. It would be parts that were discontinued, or they were like a fraction of a decimal place off in their tolerance. And we'd sort it out. There's like 50 different kinds of plastic. And we'd regrind it and sell the regrind to molding companies.
Mm-hmm.
And at that, I ran grinders, worked on them, set them up, forklift driving.
Are they still around?
Yes.
So what happened there? You were gainfully employed there.
Yes, and what happened was I was living out on Route 31 by Pearson Creek Park with my brother. We were splitting a place. He's like 10 years older than me. He's actually my stepbrother. And he got in some problems with some of the other tenants, and so they wanted him to leave. And I thought I would just take over the apartment myself and, find someone maybe down the line to split it with me for expenses. But they didn't want me there either. I don't know why. I never had a problem with anyone. So I found out that I would be homeless, but I still had a job. So I did go to a friend of mine that lives in town and asked him to rent a room. He owns a big house. He had already was renting a room to this other couple, and they didn't like the idea of me renting a room as well, because that would cramp their style or something. So they made up some stories and called the police on me. And the police came, and they had no choice but to remove me. I had already paid this guy like $600 to stay there for the month. It was pretty much all the money I had. So I went and I slept under a railroad bridge that night. And I was scrambling to try to find somewhere to live, but I didn't have really any cash because this guy wouldn't give me my money back. So eventually, I missed like 2 or 3 days of work trying to find a place. And my boss just didn't like that and told me I was fired. So then all of a sudden I had the bad position of not having a job or a place to live. And it went downhill from there.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it was within the same week I lost both my home and my job.
Wow. So now you're living underneath the railroad bridge.
Well, I spent the night there, and then 2 nights later I went back to my friend that I had paid the money to and made a deal that I could, until I could somehow talk this other couple into it. They didn't want me in the upstairs part of the house, so I ended up just sleeping in the basement.
Okay.
I put a little couch down there, and it wasn't anything fancy, but it was, it was like springtime then, and I didn't have a tent, or I wasn't set up to go camping.
Right.
And that lasted for a few months, and then I just decided to go out on my own, and I set up a tent in a patch of woods that I had already scouted out. And I'm pretty good at the camping thing. So
Okay.
I stayed all summer just out in the woods.
Now, when did you lose your job there at Magic?
That was 2 years ago.
All right. So you've been camping out in the woods now for the last year and a half?
Yeah, on and off. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes I'll find somebody that'll let me crash on their couch for a couple days. But pretty much, yeah, since since March,
Okay.
it's full time pretty much.
March of 19?
March of this year, or last year,
yeah.
because it's this year. I
2020.
forgot. Yeah, 2020.
Now, how is it sleeping out in the woods every single day?
Well, it's not too bad in the summer. I mean, it's really weird where I'm at. I hear coyotes all the time. In fact, I was talking to an old girlfriend of mine one night, and the coyotes started howling. And she was like, "What's that?" And I told her, she said, "Oh, you got to get out of there, those coyotes." I never saw them, but I'd hear them. You can't leave food around. I mean, I like camping. I always have. I don't like it as much anymore after
Right.
being forced into it, but I was pretty good at it.
Now, do you like start fires out there? Like have a little campfire?
Yeah, not every night, but I could. I made salvaged some bricks and made a little fire pit, and I didn't want to be really obvious that I was camping there. I'm pretty well hidden away.
Good. And do you ever run into the police?
No,
Okay.
no, I really scouted out a good place,
Nice.
and I've got a tent with a camouflage tarp over it and perimeter alarms. I mean, really, the only thing that hassled me were raccoons and mice.
Oh, wow. So now you've been doing that for this winter, the beginning of it. I'm sure it was kind of cold in November,
Yeah.
December,
Oh, yeah.
and now we're in January. How was it out there in the cold, in the bitter cold? Because it's colder at night than it is during the day.
Yes. And like a lot of people, when they look at the weather report, they say, "Oh, tomorrow's high is 64. It'll be nice." I don't look at the highs. I look at the lows.
Right.
The highs don't bother me, but the lows, yeah, it was cold. I had 3 sleeping bags and a pad that goes on the ground, like a self-inflatable air mattress. And if you got really wrapped up and wore an extra pair of socks and a knit hat to bed, you could be okay. It would really be bad if you had to wake up to go to the bathroom at night, because you'd have to get all unwrapped, and so you'd always try to take care of that and not drink a lot of water before you
Yeah.
went to bed. But other than that, no, it was tolerable. I mean, it wasn't really comfortable. I'd rather read myself to sleep, but you can't do that because you want to just be curled up and all buried.
So you bring up a good point. You talked about talking to your girlfriend and reading at night, and I'm assuming in today's, you have a laptop too.
Yes, but I couldn't use that out there because there's no way to power it.
I was going to say, how do you power all this being in a tent?
That's the thing. I have different places I can go to charge my cell phone.
Okay.
And like the Adult Activity Center at Potawatomi, the COVID pandemic made it more difficult, though, because like the library was closed. You can't just go there and sit and read or browse. You have to make an appointment, and the library was a good place to go to for stuff like that.
Being homeless and having access to a phone or a laptop, is there a possibility of searching for a job?
Yes, and I have been. I've kind of slacked off in the last week or two because I'm thinking about relocating to Waukegan. But yeah, job services, Indeed, I've got my resume out there,
Okay.
and I get things. But nowadays it's so different. I used to just go around with a 1-page copy of my resume to any place I could walk to,
Right.
because that's another thing. Even if it's a job in Geneva or Batavia, I have to walk there. And when I had my motorbike, I could get around more. But even in the winter, you can't use that.
When was the last time you were on an interview?
About a month ago. But it's a lot different than how it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And like the last interview I had, it was online. And, even to do that, I had to set up in advance that I could use the church, use an office at the church. I couldn't really just have the woods as a background, and you can't get internet out where I'm at anyway. So,
Right.
but yeah, it can be done. It's just a little trickier.
So what is your plan, your long-term plan to get out of this homelessness? Or
To be gainfully employed is the very first thing, and I'm
right.
hoping this place in Waukegan will help me. I mean, they charge a nominal fee. It's like $600 a month or something to stay
Okay.
there, but it's room and board and it's everything, so you don't really need to make a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
to live there. But I'm hoping that'll work out, and they will really help me to find a job. And they say there's lots of jobs out there in
Yeah.
Waukegan.
Yeah, there are. There's a lot of jobs out there in Waukegan.
Hopefully something within walking distance, or they have public transportation out there, whereas try using public transportation out here, it's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Waukegan, that goes all the way to the city.
Yeah, it's like it's a northern suburb of Chicago, basically.
There's state-funded programs to help people in your situation with link cards, with Social Security aid. You seem like a young man.
I'm 57.
You're 57 and living in the forest.
Yes,
That shouldn't be that way.
I agree.
You
And
know?
I can still be very productive. And no, it's really not right for me to be homeless. I don't. But it's like, as far as the link card goes, I can't do that without an address.
Okay.
And the address that I'm using will not work for a link card because someone at that address already has a link card, and you can't have two per household.
So there's different levels of homelessness, what I've found. Like at one level, you talked about the people that can't get any help, right? They have their addictions running them, or they're schizophrenic.
Right. They
Right.
can't even try to make any strides out of it anymore.
Now, so, I don't know where you'd put schizophrenic versus addiction. And then there's homeless, where you're kind of living out in the woods. You don't have a paycheck. You don't have income coming in. All the way to just being displaced. You have a car and you're not living at home. You don't have your own apartment or a house, but you're living in your car.
Right. I've seen that too, and I've wished that I had. Well, I would pick a pickup truck with a cap on the back.
Okay.
But that's usually what I drove anyway back when I did drive. But anyway, yeah, that would be great. I mean, I've already found lots of spots around here that you could park overnight and sleep in your truck if you had to.
So are there any other levels of homelessness that you see?
Well, and there's people who are working, but they're just like crashing on a friend's couch temporarily.
Right.
Give the friend like a couple $100 a month or whatever, and try to save up money so you can get your own place again. That's like a top level of being homeless, or a more desirable way to be homeless. My little tent in the woods, I'm better off than some people I know. But that's the other thing too. You're leaving all your stuff there in the woods, and you leave your camp. Who knows, some vicious-minded people vandalize your camp or whatever. I mean, I've heard of homeless people just getting beat up on the streets because they were homeless, which I try not to look homeless, and I can pretty much handle myself on the streets, but I've heard of that happening, and
Really?
I wouldn't like that to happen to me.
No.
But yeah, that's all I could say, if you to tell other people that some homeless people just need one chance.
Yeah.
And now I'm sure there's people that would burn you if you gave them a chance, and they'll go right back to drinking or doing drugs or whatever. But there's some people out there that are really trying to get out of it, and it's really hard once you get dragged in to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say do everything you can to avoid that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like going downhill. It's easy to slide downhill, but it's really hard to pull yourself back up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just wish I could be on level ground again.
Yeah.
But it seems like everything I do is just uphill. It's an uphill battle all the time.
Yeah. I hear you. Well, listen, thank you very much for meeting with us today and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Thank you. God bless.
God bless you too.